We got not one, but two golden retrievers here. There goes one.
Oh my gosh.
Figgy, come on up. Come on, Figgy. Figgy, come. Figgy, come. Figgy, come up.
Yes.
And here's Figgy. Come on. Oh, good girl, Figgy. No, you put that down. You put that down. Oh, there's two golden retrievers. Just what you're looking for right
you
there.
are getting annihilated. Oh my God, they're so cute.
Come on. Down.
Wow.
Down. There you guys go. You go down, okay?
Now they're going to be all riled up.
Yeah, and that's what happens. Your camera flips while you're trying to do a great interview here. So you guys go out there, okay?
Hey guys, welcome on into Drinks with Binks. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks. You know the drill. This is the show that gets to talk with some of the biggest names in sports, media, and entertainment. And we have wanted to have today's guest on for actually 2 years, almost like 2 years to the day. This guy is one of the most hardworking, kindest, and smartest people in sports, especially within football. And I guess the skies opened up and said, okay, Drinks with Binks, you may now have this person on your show during actually probably one of the busiest weeks of his life. And I'm super excited, may have given it away. Yater's gonna Yate to have on none other than ESPN NFL insider and fantasy football expert Field Yates, the one and only Field Yates. Congratulations on finally making it on Drinks with Binks and to football season. Glad to have you on.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that, Julie. It's an honor to be on here. I'm going to cheers the camera, hopefully not tilt my screen too much. It's great to be on. This is, as you noted, literally years in the making. So, I mean, it's not like you and I have been busy or anything, so we really have no excuse. But here we are, finally making it happen in August of 2021, and hopefully this is the first of many appearances going forward.
Definitely. I'm super excited we're able to have this happen, and it's just perfect timing because – okay, so we are recording this before your fantasy football marathon, and this is something, you know, everyone's so dialed into fantasy, but when you do a marathon like this, it's like a day long. Like, what kind of prep goes into something like this, other than not drinking water so you don't have to pee because you're on TV for that long?
That's a veteran call by you, right off the top, no surprise whatsoever. The prep is, so there's definitely the usual prep for a television show, which in today's day and age, a lot of the meetings are done virtually, but it's so many different topics. And what I've told people is that the biggest challenge for the fantasy marathon actually winds up not being the prep itself, because I sort of prep for this marathon throughout the year, like keeping up with who's playing for who and injuries to monitor and players that might have competition on their own team for their job, whether it's the various quarterback competitions around the NFL or a wide receiver or running back competition. The hardest part of the marathon winds up being the mental part of it, because at some point your mind goes from clear as a daisy and feeling like you know everything that's going to come your way to being on, I don't know, hour 19 of the marathon, and someone asks you like the most mundane of questions. And you start confusing, like, what's his last name again? The guy for Kansas City? And you're just like, hold on, all right, just deep breath. Patrick Mahomes, like only one of the greatest quarterbacks in terms of the first 4 years of his career, like kind of an important name to remember. So I'd say that whereas most shows that we do, like I think a 90-minute show is a long one. Normally, 24 hours is really putting your brain to the test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine then you'll probably start doubting yourself at certain points. Like, wait, well, would I pick this person at this? Because like then you have conflicting views and it's a draft, right? Like a mock draft. So am I going to do this or that? But I'd be curious, like so many people go to you or Matthew Berry, who's been on the show, and look for advice and want this and that. But like, what is it like being like a fantasy football expert? Like what goes into the job that we wouldn't even understand or know about?
Well, I always tell people that for 11 months of the year, I don't have many friends that text me. And then for 1 month of the year, I'm hearing from friends I like went to elementary school with, like someone I went to like a summer camp with, like a person that I met at a concert 14 years ago who just randomly felt like reaching out. And then like 5 text messages in is like, so I've got a difficult keeper decision to make. Who do you think in the 7th round? Like, am I keeping Aaron Rodgers in the 7th or Logan Thomas in the 19th round? And you're like, oh, I see what the real motivation was here. But what I'd say is that I truly believe this, and hopefully people that are in the fantasy industry don't feel totally differently, is that my job, or anybody's job as a fantasy expert, is not necessarily to have more information at my fingertips than you do by the time we reach Sunday at 1 p.m. Mm-hmm. What my job really is to take all of the pertinent information that is available, whether it's the matchup, whether it's the injury report, whether it's the weather, whether it's the field surface that someone's playing on, any of those factors that may or may not be relevant, and turn them into one congestible piece of information or digestible piece of information that you, the viewer, listener, reader, whatever it is, can make an informed decision with. And that's kind of the role that a fantasy expert plays. It's not that I have stats that you don't have, or I have the weather report that you don't have, but I always use my brother as a good example. My brother's a father of 2 young kids. He's a busy man with work. His wife, also a busy woman with work. Like, they don't have a lot of extra time in their day as it is. So for him to have to keep up with, like, hey, is so-and-so questionable? Are they off the injury report? Is this top cornerback going to play or not? They may not necessarily have the time during the week to follow those things as closely as I do, whereas I can recite every team's injury report by Friday afternoon without even reading a script. So it's my job to give you all the information in a small, tiny, easy-to-understand package, which is a TV show on Sundays, so that you are ready to set your lineup by 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm, right. It's just like actually one thing, and I'm going to go with it. If you're into that, I'm into it. With your friends and people texting you, like, and them being like, hey, I did this, and you told me to, and it didn't work out, or I did this, and it did work out. Like, how do you deal with that?
I try to ignore the negative as much as you can. We're all humans, right? Like, sometimes it's impossible to completely ignore an ignorant comment or something that is said, not with like malicious intent, but just more like disappointment, right? You told me to play this guy over that guy. Friends are generally pretty good about it, right? I always say, and this is something that I think a lot of people know and understand, but it's a lot more difficult to hate or be unkind, face to face or in person. And not that a text message is in kind or is in person, but how many friends do you know that are going to text you and just say like, oh, you're a jerk, right? Like, you really screwed me there. So, at Twitter, you got to kind of be careful with like reading all what people have to say. And sometimes maybe just like ignoring it entirely, which that applies to a lot of corners of Twitter. But fantasy football Twitter is definitely not immune to that, because there are times where you see someone who would love nothing more than for me to be wrong, so that person can remind me that I was wrong and hold it against me. Ultimately, though, Julie, like, it's a job, and I enjoy the heck out of it, and hopefully, more often than not, we're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, because then people are like, they're like looking at you to be the thing that helps them, which is, Twitter's already crazy enough, and then that into the mix. So, I mean, kudos to you. I don't know how you do it. But before we go to break quickly, you are also obviously an NFL insider. And so you're breaking news, and you also have fantasy. Like, how do you balance the two of them?
I kind of find that they're sort of like they are not always intertwined, right? Like, a defensive tackle getting an extension, or maybe a cornerback getting released, or whatever the circumstances are for news, don't always translate one-to-one in terms of fantasy intel. But what I have found is that people are so voracious in their fandom for football that they want the news as much as they want the fantasy insight, and sometimes they take the news to lead them to fantasy insight. So if you get information that, hey, the Giants are signing Devontae Booker, well, then the first thought process is not, okay, how does that help the Giants? It's more, all right, so that's the insurance policy to Saquon Barkley, might be worth a draft pick for me later, somebody to keep an eye on, whereas if he had signed in Washington, you might say to yourself, like, all right, I'm not so sure there's really a path there, and like, best case scenario isn't the same as what it would be if you got an opportunity elsewhere. So I found that you kind of can take the two and sort of put them onto one parallel track, as opposed to news and fantasy being so dissimilar that you're serving a different audience, if that makes sense.
No, it's very helpful, and I can imagine you're like, okay, I'm just going to pick this guy, and I'm joking. business is usually like, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. I'll do this first. But they do definitely correlate with one another. Fantasy is very important, and we know that everyone is very curious about what the tips are this season that they should be looking forward to. And we have our expert here, Field Yates, and we're going to have a whole lot more on Drinks with Binks when we return. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from ESPN, and I've just been drinking and binking. I didn't realize binking was a verb, but Julie told me about that. So apparently we were binking, we were drinking. I enjoyed one more than the other. I'm not going to tell you which one.
Welcome back into Drinks with Binks. I'm JSB, joined by ESPN's Field Yates. We're just sipping on a little bit of libations, but as we just found out, we got a little sneak attack.
Wow. Yeah, what's going on there? What just happened? Hey, Cisco, come here, buddy. Cisco, come here. Cisco, come say hi. Look here. Cisco, come here. We got not one, but two golden retrievers here. There goes one.
Oh, my gosh.
Hey, Figgy, come on up.
He's
come on, Figgy. Figgy, come.
Boy.
Figgy, come.
Oh,
Figgy, come up.
Yes.
And here's Figgy. Come on. Oh,
so
good
cute.
girl, Figgy.
So
No, you put that down.
puppy.
You put that down. Oh, there's two golden retrievers. Just what you're looking
Field,
for right
you
there.
are getting annihilated. Oh, my God, they're so cute.
Come on. Down.
Wow.
Down. There you guys go. You go down, okay?
Now they're going to be all riled up.
Yeah, and that's what happens. Your camera flips while you're trying to do a great interview here. So you guys go out there, okay?
Now I feel like we opened the floodgates. They're like, what a contenders.
It's basically a Royal Rumble in the office, which I'm actually accustomed to. So I'm just going to keep powering through it because it's not the first time this has happened.
Okay, let's get into what you are very good at and fantasy. We know people, fantasy football. This season, 3 tips. What do we got? What do we need to know about this season for drafting?
Here's some very important tips. And if you've heard tips like this before, that's okay. Like the reminders more than anything else. The most important thing you have to remember, Julie, most important, is fantasy football drafting is about value. And what I mean by that is like my temptation, if I played fantasy football for the first time and I saw that Patrick Mahomes was projected to score more fantasy points than anybody else in the entire league, well, then I try to get it with my first pick. Not so fast. That's not how it works in fantasy. What you are looking for is a guy who plays a position where there are fewer great options. So Patrick Mahomes is magnificent. I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Or right there with Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers at the very least. However, in fantasy, there are like 20 quarterbacks who are going to be good this year. However, there's not that many running backs who are going to be great this year. So you need to think about value first. That's most important. You got to think about value. Number 2. Wide receivers are incredibly deep this year. Incredibly deep. There are, every year we talk about this, but I feel like this year more than ever. I truly believe that you could find a home on a fantasy roster for like 70 wide receivers this season. There's that many good players, whether they're in their team starting lineup or one injury away from being a really useful piece of their offense. So I do think that there are incredible wide receiver options late in your draft. And the third thing, and this is an important one, and I think it's important, the late Chris Westling, who was an incredible football mind and loved fantasy as well, used to always talk about this. And I think it's a great reminder that people so frequently overlook is that it's your fantasy team. It's not mine. It's not Cisco's. It's not your cousin's. It's your fantasy team. So when you're agonizing over a decision and you think to yourself, like, I'm sure everybody else knows what I should be doing here, they probably don't. Because they, if they were in your shoes, would probably have the same mindset that you're having right now. The, what do I do? Do I do this? Do I do that? Indecision is a very natural part of fantasy football. So I always tell people, it's your choice. If you ask me, and I get this all the time, as we were talking about before, like for some fantasy advice, and you give me 2 options, should I keep this player in the 7th round or this player in the 19th round? And I say, hey, if it were me, I'd choose the player in the 7th round. And your response is, really? Well, what that tells me is that you were planning on keeping that player in the 19th round, and you should have done so from the get-go. Just stick with your gut. So I know those sound a little bit rudimentary, a little bit fundamental, but I do believe those are sort of like 3 principles that are going to apply in a lot of years. But people need to be reminded about those things every single year because they work their brains into a pretzel trying to decide on things that they know in their mind and what their instincts tell them are probably the same as they have always been.
Okay, that's good to know. Confidence. I'm going to go into this confidence. Whatever I want. When I get on a fantasy football team, which Matthew Berry promised me he'd help me get into because I'm like that kid in school that has no friends. Okay, moving on. Who do you have more concern for coming back from injury, Dak Prescott or Saquon Barkley?
I would go with Saquon Barkley, which is sort of interesting because Dak Prescott is the one who right now is dealing with not just coming back from the ankle injury, but also the shoulder. I think they're calling it a lat strain with the shoulder, which I don't know if I have a lat myself. I think I do. Maybe. But if I do, it's in my shoulder, I think. Mm-hmm. He's less concerning to me just because the Cowboys continue to sort of trumpet the same message, which is like, hey, he's going to be fine for week 1. Like, it's still middle or early August or, not even August 25th. Like, we'll be fine, right? Saquon Barkley, though, and maybe this is the Giants just managing expectations, but all offseason, if you ask anybody, Joe Judge, their head coach, Dave Gettleman, their GM, Saquon Barkley himself, ownership group, we don't have a timeline. We're not going to put him out there any sooner than he needs to. And it's possible that he comes back, I don't know, maybe week 2, week 3, and looks like the best running back in football again. But it feels like this team is going to be very calculated about when they bring him back. So along those lines, Saquon's a little bit more worrisome to me, especially when you got a running back who, and I guess Dak's shoulder should be concerning along these lines, but a running back whose knee has been surgically repaired, a little bit scary.
Yeah, he hasn't played, it feels like, in 100 years. But then again, I don't even know what day it is anymore. We have a whole lot more that we want to get to with Field Yates, including Fields' fantasy draft of Fields. What does that mean? Well, we'll tell you all about that after this break. Don't go anywhere. We're drinking and binking Field Yates style. Welcome back to Drinks with Binks. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, joined by ESPN's Field Yates. And you know him so well from fantasy, from NFL, and so we thought we would have Field give us his fantasy draft of Fields. People, actual Fields, things with Field in it, the name. So, Field, this is really big. I want to know who you are taking first overall in your fantasy draft of Fields.
So I wrote down some notes, and I want to make sure that I do this appropriately. Number 1 overall, Lambeau Field. And here's the reason why. It's probably one of the most historic venues in all of sports. I have never been to Lambeau Field. I have been to probably 25 of these 32 NFL stadiums, and I've never been to Lambeau Field. It's perfect football weather, no matter what the weather is at Lambeau Field. That is my number 1 overall pick amongst Fields' fantasy of Fields.
Fields' fantasy draft of Fields. And that's a good one. And we got to get you to Lambeau.
Yeah.
A bit dicey. You picked something you've never been to before. Who are you taking second overall in Fields' fantasy football? Fields' fantasy draft of Fields.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like a little bit of a throwback here. Did you ever listen to the band, or maybe still do now, Korn? So Fieldy Korn, number 2 off my board. I thought Korn had some jams. They had some back in the day. And as a kid, sometimes having a unique name, it's a great thing. I really believe that. But sometimes it does sort of leave you subject to some sort of wandering eyes from others, some fun, some jokes being made on your behalf, or I guess at your behest. And yes, I think Fieldy Korn helped make me feel like Field was a real name.
Oh, I love that. And he had an even more interesting version of your name too, Fieldy. But that's good.
Fieldy. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah.
I like that. It was a surprise number 2, I gotta say, when I was looking at this. Okay, well, we still have a lot of Fields left on the board. At number 3, who are you picking in Fields' fantasy draft of Fields?
Number 3 in the Field fantasy draft of Fields is Justin Fields. And I don't care if I'm being a little bit too knee-jerk. I love Justin Fields, and I want him to score 100 touchdowns this year. It probably won't happen, but I absolutely loved him coming out of Ohio State. I am an Ohio State fan. My mother's from Columbus. I went to a bunch of Ohio State games growing up. Justin Fields brought a lot of good vibes and good memories to the Yates household. I'm in on Justin Fields.
Yeah, and I think you actually are in fantasy as well. I was watching you and Barry because you never know what's going to happen with Justin Fields.
Yeah, we'll find out what happens, but we're in.
Okay, all right. And next on the list, who's going to make it in Fields' fantasy draft of Fields?
Yep, Fields' fourth pick in fantasy draft of Fields is Jackson Field. And you're probably saying, what the heck is Jackson Field? Jackson Field, literally no one knows what that is. This is like this huge show and no one knows what Jackson Field is. Well, let me tell you something. If you did a ranking of the best players in the history of Wesleyan lacrosse, and you went to the first 8,000 guys on the list, and then you went down another 5,000, you still wouldn't find me. But you will find me as one of the members on the roster from 2006 to 2009. Some would say, actually no one would say this. I was going to say some would say I was a star, but literally no one would say that. Someone would say that I was there, and I was there. And we played our home games at Jackson Field, the Birdcage. It's named after the late Terry Jackson, one of the great coaches in Wesleyan history, no matter the sport. And a lot of memories made there. Some of my best friends, many of my best friends, my teammates in lacrosse, brothers for life. Jackson Field. And this may be one of those segments that only applies, it's very niche specific. Yes. But for those that get it, as they say, if you know, you know.
Right. And that Wesleyan lacrosse, that is the field where you played lacrosse. And everyone knows everything about my life on the show because it is my show, but that my boyfriend played lacrosse with you. The one that is the one boyfriend that is locked in the bedroom while we do this show. So I'm glad he will be very happy that you said Jackson Fields.
I got to be honest, Julie. Honestly, the group of guys, would have never thought that Spike would meet a woman as wonderful as you. It really is one of the great miracles. I'm honestly, we had much lower expectations. I'm not going to lie. So I'm happy for you. And him as well. You. Yes, very happy.
I'll make sure to clip this and put this online so everyone sees
it. Good. Yeah, anytime you can roast one of your best friends in life, you got to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot to be drafted in the Fields fantasy draft of Fields. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
I could have been better. Yeah, thank you. This was a blast.
You're great. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, guys, we have a whole lot more to come with Field Yates. Yater's gonna Yate. Don't go anywhere. This is Drinks with Binks. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on all social media at Fubo Sports. Hey guys, we've had an awesome time drinking and binking with ESPN's Field Yates and Field. Big season coming up. What do you got on the docket? Where can we find you next?
Fantasy football now every Sunday from 10 a.m. to 1 Eastern time on ESPN2. Fantasy Focus every single day from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern time, Monday through Friday, I should say. Twitter, Instagram, at Field Yates. And if you feel like following me on TikTok, I am at Matthew Berry, TMR.
That was a good one. I was like, Fields on TikTok? Wow. But
I'm a consumer, not a producer.
Yes, it is great. And also Cisco Yates. Make sure you follow that dog. He's super, super cute. Might be a private account. But anyway, thank you so much for coming here on the show. Really appreciate it. Cheers to you and everything that you've accomplished. Wonderful seeing you flourish in the football world and beyond. And guys, make sure that you check out all of our other episodes of Drinks with Binks and beyond on Fubo Sports' YouTube page. We've got 100 million episodes that we've done of this. It's been a wild ride. We absolutely love it. And until next time, bottoms up, bitches.
Bottoms up.
Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on all social media at Fubo Sports.